Well, Happy New Year to everybody out there. Hope everybody had a great time. How did you guys do for New Year's, or what did you guys do?
I was all by myself, man, abandoned again, just sitting in the dark at home.
Kismet. How about you, Nico?
Same thing, pretty much. I didn't really do nothing. But Happy New Year to you guys.
Yeah, Happy New Year. And what a way to kick off the new year with a very special guest, one of my longtime friends and students and workout guys, the living legend, with one of many, Brian DeNeve. Welcome to the show, Brian.
Thanks, Tony. It's great being here. I mean, I've been listening to you guys since you launched, 6 months ago, I think you mentioned. It's been awesome just hearing all the talk and back and forth, and great to jump on and contribute to some of that. Happy New Year as well.
Yeah, and we actually have the culmination of the hair wars right now between you and Joe, and we're going to find out a winner hopefully by next week, because I'm going to poll everybody out there to make their vote on who has the best hairstyle, either Brian or Joe Cardinal, and yeah, we're going to find out.
So what's our prize if I win or if Joe wins?
Golden shampoo bottles.
Okay. I'll take that. But are we counting body hair too, or just the hair on our head?
No, let's keep this, PG. No. Although if Joe wants to enter that, I mean, Nico will probably win that one, I think.
Yeah, I think I got that, Joe.
Yeah, you probably do, man.
Well, it goes back, the body hair question goes back to like we were doing with the head hair too, is like, is it quantity or style? Because there's a lot of styling you can do with body hair that should count towards the overall.
I was not aware of that, Joe. I don't know if we want to even broach that subject, but I was not aware you could style body hair.
Oh yes, for sure.
Well, can I just ask, where'd you learn all this? Because, Mario Tricosi, or where'd you go?
Oh, no, I just get yourself a pair of clippers and use your creativity. You're a jazz improviser. I mean, I'm sure you could come up with some interesting ideas for personal body hair.
Yeah. So, yeah. Okay, Joe, I'm glad that those medication things that you're on are working somewhat. But outside of that, yeah, we have Brian here. We're going to have a few more guys coming up in this new year. Just waiting for them to, scheduling. But so, Brian, what's cooking, man?
Just like everyone else, getting through 2020 and all of the challenges that had. I guess pick your poison, so to speak. It was a interesting year, needless to say. And then, looking forward to 2021. Broadcasting from Wisconsin. I've been up here for a while, I think going on 15 years. So we kind of got like a little multi-state, thing going on. It sounds like with Indiana and Illinois and Wisconsin and
Tri-State. Yeah, come to think of it. It's been 15 years since you've been up there.
Yeah, 06, I think it was maybe the fall. So it's, Madison and Milwaukee back and forth. Now I'm in Milwaukee. So,
yeah, it is amazing how time flies. And I met you first time in 1998, I believe. So it's going on 23 years that we've known each other.
Yeah, that's correct. 98.
Yep. Out in Pennsylvania. Yeah, it was just, and then you moved out here, and again, it's mind blowing to me where all this time goes, because for me, when I look back on it, it just doesn't seem like it was all that long ago, right?
No, Tony, you were in your early 30s when I met you, so that gives you an idea.
Well, I still am, aren't I? Or, I can't count that high, right?
We edit that part out for sure. Yeah.
Don't I wish? I don't mind being, 56. I mean, that's fine with me, but, yeah. And Joe back then, I remember with Joe, with Joe working out, and then he had to quit and go on to other endeavors like raising a family and working on his body sculpting hair career and all that. But yeah, it just, boy, time. Wait till we get Javier on here, because I think I've known you, Brian, longer than I've known Javier. I've known Bruce out of the group the longest.
Sure. Yeah, Javier started, I think, with us in '99. I was there about a year, and then he's
Yeah.
obviously, gone on to do great things, obviously. And I'm kind of in the same boat with the raising the family that Joe was then and Javier was then, because he was kind of a younger parent.
Yeah.
I've got a 3-year-old and a 7-year-old, so now I'm dealing with what some of you guys were dealing with, 15, 20 years ago, with balancing the time with the family, and then trying to get time to work out and continue to train. But it's a good time, just the same.
It is. I mean, it's, great friendships last forever. And even if you don't talk all the time, it doesn't matter. I know that there was people that I was tight with growing up in Cleveland. And, some of them I haven't seen in, 30, 40 years, but we're still tight. Every now and then we'll chat at each other somehow or another. And, but yeah, you're one of the guys that was there from the beginning, the Mecca, as they called it, the old tool and die shop.
Wait, who calls it the Mecca?
That's what they used to call it back
Oh,
then.
did they?
The Mecca, the Mecca
Oh,
of
you're
cat
right. I
wrestling.
guess no, because that makes sense. And just to rewind everybody, before there was social media, before people existed via like chat forums, and then you had a couple of different forums over the years. So that was one way that there was definitely a kind of a pretty tight knit, or a group that was interacting with one another, to learn about Tony Cecchine catch wrestling. So yeah, now that you mentioned it, the Mecca, I think was the term that was being thrown around then.
Yeah, that was an interesting times. We were pretty much on the forefront of the World Wide Web as well. I think I came on the internet in '93 or '94. That's over 25 years ago. Time's just marching on, and shit. We've been out of the tool and die shop for a long time. I would say uh 16 years, maybe something like that. I believe I had just turned 40 when Kevin and George found the building. Um, yeah, I believe. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's when it was. So 19 or 2004. Um, interesting, interesting times, man.
Well, we can't forget our Triton few years there. That was
Yep. Triton was great.
great facility too.
Fantastic. Harry McGinnis for allowing us to work out there and working out with the wrestlers in the weight room. And, I filmed quite a few things there, which was nice. And it was a great facility. Unfortunately, now I live so far away from it, it's not practical for me to go there. But yeah, it's just interesting how times, just keep rolling on. I mean, we had a lot of people at the tool and die shop. We had a lot of people at Triton. Shoney was at both places, the tool and die shop and Triton. As a matter of fact, Shoney was a graduate of Triton College.
Yeah, his picture's on the wall if you ever go up there, because he was national champ, one of the better wrestlers they ever produced. So
and Tom Erickson
with his real name, we're not going to say his real name, but he
Yeah.
doesn't go by Shoney on that picture.
No, but Tom Erickson too, who was Div 3-year JUCO champ, whatever, and he was a monster, great man, monster guy, was one of the in the beginning of the MMA thing. And yeah, it's just time. Yeah, we had a lot of people. Some are lost to antiquity, because we had so many people going through there, but also we had a lot of people who didn't go through there who claimed they did.
Oh, is that right?
You had, oh my goodness, I'm dealing with that right now. I've dealt with that. I remember getting an email once, this is going back a ways, maybe 10, 12 years ago, something, from some guy who, a very pleasant email, oh, my teacher, really, likes you. And, he actually trained with you in Chicago and, like 1982. I'm like, me. He didn't train with me in Chicago in 1982. I wasn't even in Chicago in 1982. So you get a lot of that. But I mean, like Joe gets it. Joe goes through it. I run into these women who all claim they dated Joe. And I mean, not just average women, but, many of them, and all walks of life. Yeah, I know Joe Cardinal very well. Oh, he was a wonderful guy. Oh, he did this and that back then, before he got married and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, Joe, I mean, is most of this true or?
Well, that's the difference. Yeah, they're all 100% telling the truth. So that would be the difference, I think, of the circumstances we're talking about is that, yeah, all those women have dated me. But, actually, the timeline was interesting. So you met Tony in 98. Was that before Lost Art of Hooking came out?
Yes.
Yes, it was.
Wow, that's kind of impressive because I don't think most of the world had known, I think that was kind of really how Tony most of the world found out about him. So how did you hear about him? Was it just a seminar or?
Yeah, Tony was starting to make some rounds via, there was a thing called the seminar tape, which I don't even know if that's still available, but that was
No.
a tape you had produced in the mid 90s at a gym in Ohio that was, and keep in mind in the context of what, you think about BJJ or the grappling community now versus 25 years ago and how things have evolved or changed. When somebody's coming in with, this is how you do conditioning, this is a submission outside of a rear naked choke and an arm bar, and obviously just a flavor of what catch wrestling was, and created a lot of buzz online with just going through some various holds and what I wouldn't even consider anything too fancy, just really the fundamental stuff, top wrist lock, double wrist lock, conditioning elements and how to properly train. And that definitely created a lot of buzz, and he started doing seminars, and he joined up for a camp out on the East Coast at Edinburgh University. And so I went to that camp, and it was a great time. I mean, there was a lot of really good people out there that went on to be bigger names in martial arts, like Adam Singer, Straight Blast Gym was there, and Cecil Birch, who's BJJ black belt out of Arizona. Bill Claussen was an attendee. He was an All-American, I think multiple All-American, right? Tony out of Lehigh. So there were some good guys in the room that I was happy to meet, like kind of early in their career. Most of all Tony, of course, because I ended up moving to Chicago really a few months later, in large part to train with him.
I was very surprised, and mentioning all those guys were great. I did some seminars for Cecil. You lose touch with people. The times back then were horrible on the internet. It was every day. It was a war. Now I don't go on. I don't go to forums, and I haven't in 15, 20 years, maybe not quite 20 years, but solid 15 years. Now things are different. Like Brian said, they're a little more open. People are more willing to, they know now that there's so many limitations, and you've got to learn from guys like myself and others. Back then, man, it was really bad. Oh my God.
Well, put in perspective, like what you see now with political dialogue on the internet.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously times are not exactly, it's not exactly kumbaya on the internet, but it's tampered down a little more in the MMA fight, martial arts, wrestling community. But that visceral, toxic banter that you see now, like in some of the political dialogue in society, is what we saw then, I would say, in the 90s, early 2000s.
It was a shame because there was a lot of people who were just so misguided. I mean, lost. I mean, you just had it was just craziness. But I do want to mention, you brought up Bill Claussen, who came out here to train, and just, wonderful guy. And another one I lost touch with. Sensational wrestler. And we talk about time moving on, and timing is everything. And when he was in his peak, internationally, or any Olympic aspirations, he had to go through both Tom Erickson and Bruce Baumgartner. You talk about, I mean, wow. Those were, all three of them actually were phenomenal wrestlers. Bruce Baumgartner's record, speaks for itself. As a matter of fact, Bruce Baumgartner was there at that.
Oh yeah, because he was the head coach, and so he came in and stopped and chatted with us, and we interacted with him in the hallway. And this is during the summer, so there was also wrestling camps going on. So we were sharing the room with high school kids and, junior high. And then we had obviously our group over here. So, man,
Somebody is whistling in the background, by the way. I can hear that, at least in my good ear. I'm hearing some buzz. I don't know who it's coming from, but I don't know. But those were good times. And it, when Brian moved out here, it was really interesting. We had we ran into a cast of characters through the years here. Some people were really cool, others had an agenda, but the bottom line is we kept plugging away, and here we are 20 some years later, we're still going. Probably will until, the end of my time, on this planet, I hope. But we also did, I like to, everybody talks about the, the wrestling and the fighting and all that. But many of us developed a great friendship, and we had a lot of fun outside of the gym. And that's something that's really never discussed, because people see me, for example, they see me all serious, showing these moves and da-da-da. Yeah, well, guys like Brian know the other side, the wildness, the fun and shit that we've done. Some stuff we can't discuss, but it was all good, nothing bad. But yeah, I really kind of miss those times. And, of course, some people that we, like Kevin and others, are no longer with us. We can't share any memories we can't make any new memories with these people because they're gone. But boy, we sure been through a lot. I'll tell you that. Sickness, happiness, sadness,
relationships, obviously.
Oh, I guess I can talk about
female.
This
We're
one.
talking here. Yeah.
Yeah. Female. I'm sure I could talk about this because it isn't so bad, but I literally was on the telephone with Javier talking about whatever. And his wife at the time was in Indiana, and he's like, "Oh, she's on the other line. Hold on." And he goes to talk to her, gets back on the phone with me. And I'm like, "So when's she coming back?" He's like, "Well, I don't think she is." So I was literally on the phone with him when he finds out that his first marriage is over, pretty much. And what do you do with that? But that's the thing. We were not just student, teachers, this or that. We were friends first and foremost. And I always tell people that, I don't want to train anybody that I don't really like. I don't want to be around somebody that I don't like. I'm not going to hurt the guy, or I just get those people out of my life as if they don't exist. So yeah, we've been through a lot. We've grown, and 1998. So yeah, we're going on 23 years. I mean, I look at you now, you look like you're 23, for God's sakes. You look young.
Thank you very much. That's the good filter that I put on my Zoom lens. So that's
Oh, okay. Now, I'm glad you brought that up, because we're going to do a little plug here. So I've always been kind of hesitant to like sell myself, I guess, in a way, like asking for this or that. But for the past month-ish, maybe a little bit more than a month, let's say 6 weeks or so, call it 2 months, I've been doing a lot of research, learning how to, video, camera work and presentation. This will be my last show coming from this room. My home gym area with the cameras and stuff should be done, hopefully this week. I'm still waiting on stuff. But anyway, so I don't know much about social media. Even though I've been on the internet forever, I don't know much about social media. So Joe Cardinal tipped me off, and I started paying attention that when we're on YouTube, and I'm getting ready to launch the addendum to the YouTube stuff, where I'll be putting out videos 3-4 times a week. We're supposed to ask for likes. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and hit the bell, so you get notifications of upcoming stuff. And I've always been hesitant to do that, but everybody, all these pros, they all do that. All the professional videographers that I was watching on YouTube, all do that. I guess it's mandatory. And they say, because it really helps out, because then you get followers, and then we could start to monetize and all of that jazz, which would really help. So for those of you that are listening to this podcast on YouTube, Joe, you say it, because you do it better than me.
Well, I mean, just obviously, if you like what you're hearing and you want to support Catch Wrestling, please do, share the videos, it helps. Every little bit helps keeping this going. So all your help online is appreciated.
Yeah, it really is. We don't take anything for granted. It's been a struggle for these 20 some years, and we're still plugging away. But thanks to guys like Brian and, Bruce, who I want to have on the show. That is going to be a very special show. Matter of fact, I think we need to have we need to get the band back together again for that. We need to get you, Brian. We need to get Bruce, maybe Dino Martino, get Martin on here, even Javier. That'd be great. But yeah, it's interesting because I don't want to talk too much about with Bruce. We'll wait for him to come on, but he was we were talking about how crazy it was 25 years ago on the internet, full of bullshit. He was like the beacon. I would read things about him, and I was new to the internet. I didn't know much. And I kept reading some of the things that he had written, which were very articulate and very cool. And I went through somebody else because I didn't know how to do this. I asked somebody who was a little more savvy. Can you get a hold of this guy? Just tell him I think he's awesome. I think he knows a lot about wrestling. I think he's a good guy. And that's how that happened. And then somehow or another, I guess we exchanged phone numbers, and then we ended up meeting in person. But as I said, I'll save that for the day that he's on. But yeah, I don't miss those days, man. I don't miss those days at all.
What was so ironic about it, Tony, was we really keep in mind that we didn't have a public school. I mean, you didn't have a public school. It was a gym. You're training a few guys that were really interested. You had a forum, which was, I think, members only for the most part, or at least, maybe later on it was. And you were releasing videotapes. And yet there was this really, I would say, visceral reaction by some people in the grappling or martial arts community toward what you were doing. And I just never really understood that, because it's not like you were, I mean, as you mentioned, kind of with, Lost Art of Hooking, you had to kind of play up a little bit because of who was producing the tape series. They wanted you to be kind of that contrarian to a certain extent, but we kind of kept to ourselves, and yet people felt so, I don't know, threaten's the right word, or they would just react like, we already said, we're just guys trying to do this and we enjoy it. We think it's got a lot of benefit beyond what BJJ offers, especially at that time. And the reaction from not everybody, because there are obviously a lot of people who are open to learning or finding out more, was just so bad. I would say I don't even understand it to this day.
Yeah, I don't either. And then, made me walk away, and I'll never go back. Every time a couple people, I don't want to use the term lured, but they were nice about it. Hey, come on, why don't you come to my side, or let's try this again. It just never works out because everybody has an agenda, and it's always, I've noticed, the talentless people, the people who literally bring zero to the table, no ability, nothing. And the people who have a lot of talent, always said nice things, to me or about me, and it was a mutual thing, mutual admiration. But yeah, I guess you get that though in a lot of things. Even in the music business, not so much, but it does come into play to a degree. But in music, you're dealing with people. This is their, they're trying to gig, make it big, I guess. There is no really making it big in the martial art world, like, where you're going to earn 20 million a year. But yeah, we're just regular guys just trying to, go along, put a roof over our head. And the more you trash anyone, the less business they're going to make. And, if they have something worthwhile, you're never going to get to experience it because you can run them out. And that's what happened to me, with the lies and the smears and all the bullshit. And it happens to others, and then,
that's what cancel culture is all about nowadays. Is that
now
you
see,
we're going back to what we're seeing now in like modern the world. We were dealing with it at such a subculture micro level that everything I work in. So to my career wise, I ended up becoming a journalist, and I work in public relations now for the last like 7 years. So, but I will tell you, so much of what I learned about communications now is based upon my experiences back in the 90s, early 2000s with you and some of the whether it be the campaign against you or just how people interpret information or what seems to stick, what doesn't. I mean, it really was a good training ground for, I guess, what I'd apply in the business world.
Well, good for you. I'm
That
glad
is, that
could
is, I
help.
don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad I was of help. Yeah, you know, and again, like I said, I see this in other lines of, you know, it wasn't just me, it was other people as well. But you know, I also have, you know, tremendous supporters who, you know, years go by and they're like, man, the stuff that you said, you know, as far as technically has all come true. You know, everything you were saying back in the 90s, now we're seeing it and people are using your techniques and doing this and that and using your philosophy and approach. So yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple examples and then we can keep moving on. But for example, interval training. I mean, interval training from a conditioning standpoint. This is pre-CrossFit. You know, CrossFit's early 2000s. I think 2000 came out. We're talking powerlifting, integrating those, you know, that type of thing with cardiovascular things in a combined manner. We're talking leg lock attacks. Okay, that's the big thing now in the last few years, and it's in vogue and it's obviously evolved, and you know, it's pretty impressive what people are doing. But we're talking 25 years ago, you were doing this, you know, leg locks and attacks. So I mean, those are just a few examples that pop in my head of really being ahead of the curve when it came to what was happening and it would eventually be, you know, considered mainstream now.
Yeah, that's true. And another thing is getting off your back. Don't go to your back, this and that, whatever. All that's, you know, in vogue now. You know, let's get back up to our feet. And, you know, I've said this
takedowns, takedown. Nobody was doing takedowns 25 years ago. I mean, some
know.
people were, but some people cross train with wrestlers. But now it's like, no, if you want to learn grappling, even jujitsu, you got to learn how to go on your feet.
Well, I said the
Right there.
biggest, well, it is a mistake in a way, but it's nobody's fault. With the Lost Art of Hooking, it was geared just to show my grappling, you know, and as opposed to the stuff on the feet, strikes and everything else that I do. And that really, that's the biggest regret, that I didn't, you know, I wasn't able to do that. As a matter of fact, we filmed a weightlifting section there. It was actually filmed, but never released. I never saw a copy of it or anything. And Bruce and I wanted to do more, but we ran out of time. Same thing with even when I did Snap No Tap, there were still things I wanted to do on the Snap No Tap. You run out of time. You know, you're allotted an X amount of days to film, and you know, you just never can get it all finished. But you know, yeah, I do look back now and I say, well, yeah, now that people are listening, now they're incorporating things that I said. And a beautiful thing about video is the proof is there. You know, I said this, I showed that back in 19 whenever, you know. So you can't, you know, you can't argue with it. You know, it's not revisionist history. It's cast in stone. There it is. But on a more cheerful note, you know, it's great to see that you went on to have a great success. You know, you're doing good in your career. You have a beautiful wife and children. You know, everything is going great. And same with Joe. You know, Joe ended up raising 3 beautiful children, wonderful wife. You know, nice house, steady, rock solid career. You know, Nico, we just met a little over a year ago. One of the greatest guys I ever met. His life is in transition now. He's moving and everything. And you know, it's just, I wish that for everyone. I want everybody's life outside of the gym to go good, because the better your outside life is, the better your gym is. You know, your life falls apart outside, kind of, you know, some guys gravitate towards the gym, but ultimately, you know, you have to have a good mindset, I think, all the way around. But you know, or at least you have to have, like in my personal life, my life was so bad that this was my salvation, you know, and it was designed as my salvation. It wasn't geared to be fun. This was told to me, expressed to me. This is your salvation. This is going to save you. So for those of you who don't have the best personal life right now, maybe you can use your training, whoever you're training with, or whatever it is you're doing, use that, look at that as a salvation mechanism. That's my biggest advice.
So, Brian, I'm interested to know, because I never got a chance to meet you, and I never got a chance to train at the gym in Chicago. So going back, you actually found Tony through what, like a video VHS tape or something for a seminar? and then
Yeah, this
what
is-
happened?
this
You
was-
contacted him, or how did you get a hold of him?
Well, he was being promoted as part of a group that was he was one of the instructors at this camp. But there was let's just say that there was you know, a kind of small community and buzz around Tony being built, and he was part of a training camp, or I should say like a martial arts wrestling camp out in Edinburgh. So I went for it, and I didn't even know really what the guy looked like at the time. I just heard all this stuff about him. And keep in mind, this is before I mean, this is the formative stages of the internet, the first few years. So there may not even be pictures of people, you know, floating around. Maybe people are talking about it. And so I'm like, you know, to heck with it. So it looks like something to do. And yeah, I just drove out there, and and it was a big turnout of, you know, probably a few dozen people that were training. I was just blown away. And I had been doing grappling at the time. I've been doing jujitsu for I had some experience with what was blue belts back then would have their own gym. So I had trained with somebody at that for like 6 months, and then also with a what was considered no holds barred then. Now it's mixed martial arts, but an instructor for a little while, and you know, they all definitely, either any of those past instructors definitely had a lot to offer. But I was really impressed with Tony's approach to grappling, and really what that meant. So, you know, for me, it was like, wow, this is unlike, you know, a lot of what's out there or anything else that's out there. So it's time to really try to dive in. So, you know, I took that leap, and I was out there for really a couple of years. And then I left for a couple of years to finish my degree, and then came back to Chicago again for a couple of years. And that second round, which was like early 2000s, is when I connected with like Jason Bender and Costa, and kind of that next phase, or the next wave of students. You know, there was the core tool and die group, which was Javier and me and Martin, and then Joe was there for a little bit, and a couple of others. And then, but it's been, I don't know, I mean, all of those guys, for the most part, I still keep in touch with. And as Tony said, that's really been the biggest takeaway on all of this, is I made really lifelong friends, beyond, you know, the physical improvements that catch wrestling or strength and conditioning brings somebody. It's also, who are you meeting? What kind of relationships are building? What kind of life are you able to build out of that? And, you know, I've been a long time martial artist and I always think about like that spiritual element of what martial arts is. And I think that beyond being like some kind of Buddhist monk guy that stands in the corner or something, when I think spirituality of it is taking those ideas and principles and applying to your life, and making a better life. I don't know, that's a long roundabout way of maybe answering your question.
Well, I do remember a highlight of that training session in Pennsylvania was the one and only Lou Thesz.
Mhm.
And you know, you know, you met him, you had pictures with him. I met him, and his wife, his lovely wife, Charlie, and just, you know, you talk about intimidating. I mean, it was intimidating for me to have to go live and do my thing with him sitting on the sidelines watching. That was a unique thing, because I had never, now musically, I've experienced that, okay, where I've played with, you know, like top musicians, you know, very intimidating musicians. But fighting, come on, you know, you just do it. But knowing that Lou was there on the sidelines watching, uh, it was pressure for me, believe it or not. Uh, and I tell you, I can't believe how wonderful of a man he was, and just so awesomely uh, friendly, and just, you know, down to earth. And um, yeah, he was just great. I miss him tremendously. And you know, it's a great loss with him not being around anymore. But you know, he left his mark. The guy was really outstanding.
Yeah, how can I forget that Lou Thesz was one of the clinicians there, and just phenomenal guy. And yeah, to give people, I mean, a little context, like, yeah, Tony was out there. Everybody wrestled. Everybody was going live, and Tony was, you know, pop, pop, pop. I mean, finishing people, like guys that had experience, like, you know, 20, 30 seconds, like, whoa, this is from the feet. And yeah, I mean, do you remember what one of the things Lou said publicly about you, Tony?
Yeah, it was, and it gives me goosebumps right now, because he told his wife this too, and he says, seeing Tony is like seeing the ghost of George Tragos, if that's what you're implying.
Yeah, absolutely. A very legendary catch wrestler in his time.
Yeah, and that was Lou's
George
coach,
Tragos.
and that was it. And you know, this wasn't even my prime because I had a brain aneurysm in '93, and I couldn't even walk again without any aid of anything until '95. I had to have crutches in a wheelchair and a walker, and you know, subsequently I started to get physically stronger. So yeah, it wasn't even like I was, you know, I was damaged goods back then, but I felt really great. I had just recently broken up with somebody that I was in love with too. Like a couple months before that, we broke up in May. If I remember correctly, that was in July, I think, that we did that. Sometime in the summer. Could have been June.
I think it was June. Yeah.
Yeah, it could have been June. But yeah, so yeah, going, but just and then meeting Lou, you know, and you know, getting the, well, what kind of a guy is he? Is he this or is he that? You know, and he was all that, man. He was really just a nice, unbelievably down to earth. Everybody treated him with respect out there, and he deserved it. He was, he never really even gave himself as much credit. He used to say that he couldn't coach, which just wasn't really true. Maybe in his mind, he wasn't interested in coaching, but we would pick each other's brains. And it was, I mean, I picked up a lot of from him, you know, little subtleties or little ways that he would do things, or the way Ed Strangler Lewis would do it, or Ray Steele would do it, or Ad Santel, or George Tragos. You know, he would tell me and show me this is how they would do such and such. You know, which was
Yeah.
just
To make that connection, I mean, he was 80, early 80s, right, when he passed away
Mhm.
in the early 2000s. So keep in mind, someone like that has lived a storied life and is the bridge to those people from the early 1900s. You know what I mean? 1920s, 1930s. Like he had interacted with some of them. So the old timers of his day, and he was saying he had experienced and was able to share those, you know, those memories with you, or some of those elements, those techniques even.
Yeah, well, he shared it with a lot of us. You know, even the great Danny Hodge, who just passed away sadly. You know, Lou would tell stories about when they would wrestle and work out and things like that. And yeah, just say like what my coach Stanley Rodman was even older than Lou. Okay, so Stanley brought elements that you know into it. But with Lou, the thing about him was he could articulate to me. He could reach me, and we would talk on the phone and you know all of this you know regularly and not always you know talking about shop but just you know talking about life, you know, just talking about things. Hell, I was you know 30 something and he was pushing, you know, he's around 80, you know, so I mean there's a lot to learn in life from somebody like that who's been all over, you know. And I think too, I've always had respect for elderly people in my elders because I've always been around elderly people, being raised by my grandparents and all their friends and blah blah blah. So it was nothing for me to, you know, look up to and respect older people. Um, but he was worthy of it. I mean, I felt, you know, and it was an honor for me to know him and to have him appear on the Lost Art of Hooking. They did a video what he interviewed. They brought him out there um, to Rochester, New York, and what a great man, just great. And that's another thing. I'm doing demonstrations of holds. Lou's sitting there off camera, you know, and you know he's cheering, you know, yeah, you know, it was just great. You know, I miss him. But yeah, meeting you and staying in touch with you all these years, you took a big gamble coming out to not so much to train with me, but making a big lifestyle change, moving to the big city. You know, it wasn't always easy for you. You know, I know you hit a rough patch like we all do, and we just try to pull each other together. I mean, that's all you can do. You can't cast somebody away. But yeah, I start to get very sentimental, you know, and I start thinking about Lou, or I start thinking about Kevin King and all the other people that are no longer with us, you know, and it kind of puts a damper on things. But we have the memories at least for now, Brian. That's you
Absolutely.
know, and maybe we'll be making memories, you know, for other people. But yeah, it's just it was like they claimed the Wild West, and the Wild West probably wasn't as wild as they say. Well, the internet was wild back then, man. It probably still is. I like I say, I don't go on it. I don't miss it. Um, but as far as training, Brian's talking about intervals and powerlifting and so on. Um, I always talk about making sure that whatever it is that you're doing fitness wise is benefiting your fighting. Okay. Not just making you fit, because you could become the strongest man in the world, but that doesn't make you the toughest man in the world. As a matter of fact, it can take away from your time in the gym. So you're not spending it learning the proper techniques. It could change and alter your body structure to the point where, it's diminishing returns. You're no longer at your fighting peak. You become too much of something, right? Uh, so it's all about learning how to balance. And the big thing when Brian was training back then, everybody wanted to grapple, 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 grapple. Even in MMA, they didn't care about strikes. I mean, there was really, no offense to anybody, but for the most part, there were no good strikers in the MMA back then. And there was a lot of grappling tournaments and so on. So it was grappling, grappling, grappling. And that bothered me because I wanted to teach these guys how to fight, strikes and everything. And once in a blue moon, Brian and I would discuss it. But generally, everybody wanted to grapple on the ground and this and that, and takedowns. But there was so much more to it. So it's all about being balanced. And being balanced legitimately, not being balanced for show. How can I word this? Sometimes people complain to me about, well, the fights nowadays, they stand them up too quickly or this or that. Yeah, I get that. That may be because, again, of marketing. All right. From what I was told, one of the reasons that the UFC was dying, and it almost did die, was because of the ground fighting, because it was boring. It was, they tried to claim it was strategic. A lot of times it just wasn't. You just had guys on the ground, either catching their breath, because back then a lot of them weren't in shape, or they just didn't know what to do. And it just became, people don't want to watch this. So they made it a little more exciting. And, now the strikes are there and, blah, blah, blah. But when I talk about being balanced, I mean it for the legitimate reasons. If you're taken to the ground and if this guy's on top of you, your training, hopefully, if it was balanced, you're going to know how to get out. You're going to create that space. You're not going to have to rely on your coach, or I mean, not your coach, on the referee to stand you back up. Your training was balanced enough that you're motivated to get back to your feet. You're no longer afraid, unless you're going up against the heavyweight champion boxer of the world. You're not afraid to be on your feet because it's all good. And your ground fighting, your coach taught you enough to teach you to get back up on your feet, as opposed to staying down there, until a submission. So yeah, I'm all about being balanced in all of your training.
Hey, Tony, did Lou Thesz have a similar approach to conditioning as you do?
Well, in stages, in certain things. I was obviously stronger. I'm more of a weight guy as well. And that's not to say that Lou did not lift weights. He did. But back in Lou's day, now this isn't just Lou, this is everybody. Powerlifting really wasn't a big thing. And depending on what time in Lou's life, it didn't really even exist. Milo Steinborn was the guy that they claimed was the father of the squat in the United States of America. And he went on to become a professional wrestler as well. So you didn't have that really as an inspiration for Lou or others of his generation. Yes, you had guys, some strong men like Herman Gerner, who would do the deadlift, but Herman Gerner was basically a weightlifter, an Olympic style weightlifter. You don't see much of him record wise. I don't think anything of him bench pressing, and his squat was really nothing, outstanding. So in that regard, Nico, Lou and I were different. I was more, and of course, too, with being trained by Stanley with his strongman stuff, having a grip that was just the best grip to this day I've ever witnessed. I had an affinity for strength. So I became, and especially after my aneurysm, I became obsessed with being as strong as I can possibly be, because I never wanted to be so weak and helpless like I was back then. I wanted to have overkill. I wanted to be that was my thought process. I wanted to be way stronger than I ever was in my life. So I figured, if I'm coming back from this aneurysm thing, I'm going to be better than I ever was. That was my thought process. Now, whether it happened or not, it's indifferent. I had the motivation, and I did some crazy training back then. I mean, I put a lot of hours at the tool and die shop with no air conditioning and no heat in that segment of the gym. And Lou was not vicious like I was. He could fight. He would do very well in the UFC, but that wasn't his bread and butter was being a professional wrestler. Mine was surviving, being physically tough, being able to win a fight. So yeah, in that regard, Nico, we had different approaches. And one other thing, and Brian will chime in if he remembers this. Lou did a lot of traveling on the road when he was, wrestling, and he talked about this in Pennsylvania for the first time, about how he would train while he was on the road. He would like grab the steering wheel and he would curl himself up while driving. Or he had a training partner, or not a training partner, but another wrestler in the car. And let's say they would drop Lou off, and then the wrestler would drive the car and go up maybe 3 miles and park the car. And then Lou had to run 3 miles to the car. And then Lou got in the car and drove up 3 miles, and the other wrestler in the car ran to get his 3 mile road work in. Very creative. And Lou played a lot of handball, and I guess a lot of guys did back then, as part of his training. And I just, in the end, we were all going for the same goals. We just had different tools to use at the time.
And Tony, I'll admit, I mean, so when I first came to the tool and die shop in 1998, I was I'm over 6 foot, but I weighed 150 pounds. Okay. Very, prime, always been a hard gainer, scrawny. I had attempts at weightlifting over the years and strength training, and just getting on. And when I started training with Tony, I wasn't eating a lot. I wasn't, but I mean, we got to work, and, he showed me how to train. And I mean, I put 100 pounds on my bench press in a year and gained 25 pounds solid. I mean, that's what we're talking about. And granted, I was coming from a very bare nothing. And so I was able to make great strides, but just by some of your approach to weight training and using that, and then just having the resources of Kevin, who was obviously a champion power lifter too, was a great time. And to this day, I still draw on my experiences, and, I've obviously modified things over the years to my own accord, but, yeah, it's amazing. And strength training is just like martial arts too. I mean, there's 1,000 guys that say they know how to do it, but, especially now with all the fitness YouTubers, I like to watch some of them and, what they talk about. But that was some real deal stuff back in the day, Tony. I remember that for sure.
It was, and when I first met Kevin, it was the day that I got my medical restriction lifted from driving the car. And I'll never forget, it was March 13th, 1994. And I won't get into the whole detail, but I was having a hard time finding a place to work out because, as I told you, I couldn't walk. My right side was gone. Some gyms would not allow me to even go in there. And the other ones, the one that I was working out at, nobody would help me get the weights off the rack. And it was struggle. Some people at this bar restaurant said, well, there's a guy that comes in here. He lifts weights and maybe he'll help you. I said, well, when's he going to be here? Well, he'll be here today for sure. I hung around. I met him, and he was a big dude, but he was 48 years old at the time. And I'll never forget it. I'm like, geez, old man, that's what we used to call him, the old man, 48. Come on. But I went to his place the next day. He didn't think I was going to show up because a lot of people say they're going to work out. They don't. And then he told me, he's like, I want to be a bench press champion by the time I'm 50. I said, well, I can get you there. I said, if you can help me recover, I have the knowledge to make you a champion bench presser. And sure as shit, when he turned 50, he won the Illinois and Missouri bench press championship. Matter of fact, in my home gym here, I still have the poster, and he wrote on there, what he benched, and from the thing. And I tell you, I wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for him. because I wasn't going to
We're
live
talking here, Kevin King. Yeah.
about Kevin King. I would not be alive if it wasn't for him, because I wasn't going to live like that. I mean, I wasn't going to live the way I was living, helpless and shit. But he was there. I mean, he'd hand me the bar, and you talk about coming back from nothing. Like Brian was building up. Me too. I remember the first day I benched 200 because my right arm wouldn't work, so I had to slowly get my arm going, build the strength back up. And I remember it was on a Saturday that I benched 200 for the first time. And then I remember when I cracked 300, and then 400. It was just like, wow. But on Brian's note, and for those who are out there listening, it was a long, hard time for me to go from 200 to 300 on the bench. It wasn't that long for me to go from 300 to 400. Okay. I have my records somewhere. I used to keep notes of everything that I lifted. And I'm lifting for like 2 hours, roughly every day, hour and a half to 2 hours, 5 days a week. And when Brian came along, the thing I liked about Brian was he was like a sponge. He wanted to learn, but he was difficult to read at first because he's very stoic, and I don't know. I talked to Bruce a lot. I'm like, Bruce, you got, you're at the time, Bruce was like a social worker. I'm like, you can read what's going on here. He's fine. He's cool. Brian was hard to read. So I just wanted to make sure everything was cool. And we had we had a lot of fun. And Brian put in the hard work. It isn't me or Kevin or anybody. It's Brian. Everything Brian ever did is because of Brian. He put it in. And that's the same with everybody else. Whatever you do, you guys did it. You accomplished whatever because you guys put in the hard work.
I remember Brian being a sponge, but a very dangerous sponge. I was when you were talking earlier at the beginning of the show about us competing with our hair. I started to have PTSD because my strongest memories of the old Tool and Die was coming in and be like, oh shit, Brian's here. I've got to square off against him. It was I don't know if it was intentional for you guys, but it always felt like Brian was like the guy who was there to initiate you into the club. Like he's going to show you what catch wrestling can do, as you're warming up. And so that I remember I don't have specific memories, just kind of the feeling of the pain and the intimidation, because it was very aggressive. I think he took your mindset, the kind of aggressive, fast attack style of submission wrestling. But that was kind of some of my strongest memories and impressions back in the old Tool and Die shop.
Yeah, we had to go ahead. We had to train. I mean, the mat space we had was, God, what was it, like 10 foot by, even when we got that wrestling mat in there, was like 10 foot by 15 foot, maybe.
Yeah.
If that.
There was times there was no wrestling mat. It was just concrete. I mean, it was, quick kill. That's what you had to do. I mean, you didn't have time to move around or mess around. It was like, we got this window and this space to do it in. And it was take care of business. So I think that really kind of was an early influence in like my approach, I guess, overall. Is just the simple space constraints that we had it. Yeah. And for those who hadn't seen it, there wasn't furniture in the way. There was machines. Okay. We're talking about Tool and Die. We're talking about punch presses and drill presses and cabinets that they're not going to give. Your head or your back go up against that. You're the one who's going to give. It was unbelievable. Bandsaws and what do you call those things with the sandblasters and shit. There was all that there. I mean, it was an interesting. Well, look at the routine that was filmed there, and you could see we cleared out some space. It was a rough environment, but it was one that I was accustomed to because when I learned this stuff, I didn't go to a gym. I learned out of a house. So yeah, a lot of guys couldn't handle that. They just wanted the glitz and glamour, I think, or whatever. We again, it was interesting. We walked with our heads held high, and we pretty much kept to ourselves. But and it was in a kind of a funky neighborhood too. It wasn't in the nicest neighborhood in town. where that place was.
Yeah, every
It was-
time I left, I'm like, all right, I might get a chance to use some of this stuff. We'll see how it goes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, right. Oh yeah. Oh, absolutely. It was a good time though. You know, I thought it, and then, before, and then, okay. So then we ended up transitioning over to Triton, and then we had to wait for the gym in Bensenville to get the okay. And then, that's when I started to see people for what they really were. It's like people are like, "Oh, you're out in Bensenville. My God." These are Chicago people. They wanted to train with me, but they weren't going to drive out to for people who don't know where Bensenville is. It's right by O'Hare Airport. Matter of fact, the corner of our street was the edge of the airport. So the planes would come running in. I'm like, man, if you can't come out here, which is close, give me a break. You guys aren't really serious about training. But yeah, Kevin was, instrumental in finding that location, and he had the vision. When I showed up that one day, he called me in hysterics. I found a place for us. Like, I come up there, and I had my girlfriend at the time. We walked upstairs. I'm like, this is a dump. This is a dungeon. It was a loft above his factory, and this other guy's factory downstairs. I'm like, oh Christ, you got to be kidding me. But he had vision. Well, he was a designer. He was a tool and die guy, and he did CAD designing. So in his mind, he could see these things, and he saw it. He had it all laid out on paper. And of course, we did different things. We ended up changing things around, but yeah, that was a great place. But yeah, without him, and it's hard to believe, Brian, it's going to be 4 years come July 1st that he's gone. I just find that startling. I just do. But and Kevin, he was obviously he was older than all of us. He could be our father. He'd still get on the mat. I showed him stuff. Remember the day? Oh, Brian, we were out, and Kevin got into it. That guy that kept on, and Kevin kicked his ass. And I tracked you down. I know exactly where you were. I'm running in. I'm like, man, yeah, Kevin
Yeah,
just
we were
kicked
at the
his
bar,
ass, man.
and
Oh yeah,
you show up. Both you guys have blood on your shirt, or Kevin did, I should say,
yeah,
because he was the
Kevin.
one that tussled,
Yep.
hanging at the bar with blood on his shirt. I would never
Yeah.
forget. It wasn't his blood. I'll just tell you
No.
that.
No, it wasn't. And he broke his arm and made the guy cry and everything. Hey, I said, we got to go, man. We're on the run right now, man. We're on the lam from this. And it was just classic. And again, it was.
And that's the best place to go, is a public place when you're on the run, Tony. I'll have to insert that in there.
Well, we saw you there. So and he took him down, top wrist locked him, just like I taught him. Kevin had no previous training until he took him down. This is a guy who was a tough guy. He beat up this tough guy. And it was amazing to see how he felt, because it was a personal beef, okay, involving Kevin's wife and this and that. It was personal, and it was just that Kevin, he practiced, he listened, and sometimes when guys would come for personal training, a lot of guys were intimidated to work out with me per se, but Kevin would spar with them, box or whatever. And, even wrestle, he would do all of that. And, not that he was the world's greatest wrestler or anything, but he was just a body, and he was strong. And I think that was really important for a lot of these people who had come to train with me that had previous experience, okay, in whatever martial art. Now they're dealing with an older guy in Kevin, who really it wasn't all like super like trained per se, but he was strong. And they came to find out, holy Christ, my holds aren't working on this guy. He's just breaking right out of them, And I think that was a wake-up call for a lot of people, realizing, yeah, I thought I was using all this technique. No, you really weren't. Kevin was muscling out, and that's good. Just like we had Javier with his freak flexibility. So when you thought you had, you were able to put a submission hold on someone and tap someone out, try it on Javier, and I think that's very good to always have, someone that's a little extraordinary in a certain way to kind of keep you humble, to make you realize exactly where you're at in the pecking order,
So, Brian, you mentioned before that you gained 100 pounds on your bench. And I'm wondering, because I think it's hard to balance conditioning as well as the technical training, the wrestling, and trying to make gains with strength and even size or whatever. How did you balance your training?
I'd say overall, between there and even at Triton, it was always strength training first. You go into the weight room when you're freshest because you're going to be exerting yourself and trying to make those gains with your poundages. So that was really always the thing we led with, was like, we're lifting, and then we start doing the mat work, we start doing the strength training, or we start doing the wrestling. So I would say anybody who would be trying to balance all those things is just make sure that you get the weights in first, because if you get in the weights when you're already fatigued or, you know, wore out because of you're already training or doing conditioning, like cardiovascular type conditioning, obviously it's going to suffer on your weights. As far as the bench press specifically, a lot of it was hitting those smaller muscles that Tony taught, like blast those triceps. You know, that is your main. If you've got strong triceps and, you know, front deltoids to a certain extent, you know, you can use those. Learning how to do the proper form, of course, is always there. But I would say that's the biggest thing for us, was just lift first. And then, but you got to put in the time, and you can't just say, when you get into your training and wrestling, you can't just say, well, I'm tired from lifting, I can't put any effort here, because especially when there's a partner involved and he's trying to tear your head off, or you guys are trying to keep each other honest, even in drilling, that partner will help you bring it when it comes to the wrestling after that.
Yeah, I think that's very well said, the partner thing, because wrestling should never be a competition. You know, you're not there to win. Okay, you're there to develop each other. The core group here, everybody needs to work with each other and develop. And yeah, that's it. In the weight room, you really have to give your max, pretty much. I don't mean one rep max, but, you know, figuratively speaking, excuse me, you have to put your maximum effort in it. In boxing, wrestling training, you don't need to go 100%. You can tone it down a bit and still make great gains, because you're working on technique, or you're working on acquiring knowledge. You know, when you bench, you're shown how to do it, but that's it. Okay, you got the knowledge here. This is it. Whereas with fighting, it's a constant learning curve. You're always learning something more and more and more and more. So mentally, you have to be there, and, you know, you can't go 100% on something you were just shown. Okay, you got to slow it down and drill. So I think a lot of people want to go 100%. They want to let me just grapple. You know, that's not the way to do it, because you're reinforcing bad habits, bad muscle memory, and secondly, you don't even have the skills or the tools to really apply anything. You're just goofing around. Well, Brian did it. A lot of other guys develop, you know, good strength or whatever, which I just think is part of it. You know, it's, for me at least, it is.
So Tony, what was the structure of the class? Like, you guys would start out doing some main lifts, and then what, you'd go into conditioning and then wrestling? How did that work out?
Well, at the tool and die shop, it wasn't per se like a class, let's say. There was for the wrestling, but the workouts, you just get there, you come in there, obviously I would show you what to do, you know, in the beginning, but you want to work out, go ahead and work out, lift, get your lifts in. Okay. I got other things to do while you're lifting. All right.
Yeah.
And then once all of that's done, everybody's lifting, and some guys sometimes just didn't lift or couldn't lift that day. They just show up on the mat. Okay. Take X amount of time, stretch, you know, loosen up a little bit. I should say, not even stretch, but just whatever. Get warmed up. That's the word I was trying to think of. And then we would work on whatever the techniques were that we felt we needed to work on. Okay. And then there would be a little bit of light sparring, not going for even sometimes submissions, just working up a sweat, you know, just getting loose and moving around. But when we ended up, and those were long sessions. Even at Triton, they were like, now Triton, we really went heavy conditioning, because we had the room, and we had the whole place was matted, and they had a running track and all of that. Well, look on the Lucky 13. That was the Triton College.
And the Lucky 13, to put in perspective, was just kind of the start of the conditioning. Like, that didn't even incorporate the running. Like, the Lucky 13 was, let's just put it this way. Once I got to a certain level in the conditioning, Lucky 13 was relatively easy. It would have been.
Yeah, exactly. But we would go through that. So there would be roughly an hour of conditioning, and then an hour or so of working out. These guys were in top shape, and they become hard as nails. And I don't know what else to say other than it was great. And the Worth the Wait video was actually filmed at the Triton. There was a weight room right off of the wrestling area. So that was filmed there. The seminar series was filmed at Triton. The ripping series was filmed at Triton. You know, so there's a lot of footage of that. Yeah, those.
And I should add that, I mean, one thing that Tony did and our overall approach was you got to think long term. I mean, when I came in, I didn't have a strong wrestling background to be able to do a lot of these fundamental moves. I mean, the core of catch as catch can is wrestling, and so that includes what you would learn in a junior high wrestling room. And so Tony, I remember one day I got mauled by Bruce. I'd been there a few months at that time, and then Tony's like, he's like, because Bruce didn't always go live. I mean, he was more of a coach, and obviously with his background as a D2 wrestler and then coaching at that college level for a couple of years, he was just a phenomenal instructor and could convey information, but he wasn't always going live. One time he just put it on me, and then Tony's like, you got to work into wrestling. And I mean, there was I would say 3 to 6 months where I wasn't even allowed to touch submissions or think about them unless I was coming in with like an out of towner and they needed somebody to work out with and a partner. And it was just like, drill those core techniques, the sit outs, the stand ups, the switches, work on your proper tie ups and control and pinning, but that takes longevity. That's got to be patience. I mean, what kind of school would you say, you know what? I know you came here to learn submissions, but guess the next 6 months, you're not going to do them. I mean, what kind of student base would you have? You know what I mean? It'd be hard to keep enrollment. So, but that was the approach. And I think overall, that's really what it takes to do this stuff.
Yeah, it is a commitment, and you don't get to tell the coach what to do. I mean, you can have some questions, of course, but it's like, go to a college. You're not going to tell the professor what to teach. This is the class. You got to follow his or her curriculum. But, in the end, it's people. Yeah, there's no quick fixes. And that was part of another problem that I felt. Sometimes guys would come to me for training from out of state or out of the country. They have an upcoming match or whatever competition. I can't fix you, in 2 or 3 days. Okay. I could show you what to do, but now it's on you to practice. How am I going to know if you're doing right? And again, this is back before there was the advent of, there was video cameras, but there was no way of really sharing them via the internet. Okay. Like there is now. So, it was a difficult thing. I think sometimes guys their hearts were in the right place, but mentally they couldn't do it. Okay. Cause you needed to be here, or you needed to at least, like now we can do it with the distance learning, with the Tri-C program, because of this video stuff, we can share it. And it's really, these guys didn't have that, I didn't have that when I was growing up. I had to be there and do it. But again, it's a testament to Brian and others who had come through and stuck it out. And we knew that some of them were there just to hang out. Not everybody, that's like in any gym. Not everybody is going to, amount to being a world beater. But we had a lot of fun times back then. A lot of hard work, a lot of growth. That's the biggest thing. People developed. The ones that stuck it out, really developed. I'm proud of you guys, all of you.
So Brian, I got a question for you. I know you mentioned that you were doing a lot of fundamentals training, and Tony always says that you were a great student. So I'm wondering if you have any tips on, learning how you were able to apply what you learned and be a good student.
I think the biggest thing is you need to just, not to steal from Bruce Lee, but empty your cup. And a lot of, people say that, but not everybody lives it. And sometimes you have to go in and a coach tells you something that may not jibe, or it may conflict slightly with what you've learned in maybe some other martial art, or it may be something that you don't understand fully. And you really have to be open and receptive to taking the coach's advice. Or if you don't necessarily understand it, trying it out, and and maybe if you need to follow up with a question or say, how does this look? I think it's as much it's quite as much the student's responsibility to gain knowledge as it is for the instructor to impart it upon that student, because the instructor's doing their best or at least they should be, to tell you something or teach you something, but the student is only the one who will know whether or not that's starting to stick or whether or not they can comprehend it. So I would just say from that core element is just be open-minded and really just try to absorb it and take it in, and try to build upon it, especially with grappling, in general. And I'm not even saying any one particular art form, that it's a lot about creativity and a lot about how you can apply it to your own physiology and what it is that you like to do from a physical standpoint.
Well, he had the work ethic. I mean, Brian had a severe, serious work ethic. Okay, which not everybody can say that they have, and there's valid reasons sometimes why people don't. Brian at the time had time. Okay, he wasn't, he wasn't working 12-hour shifts. Okay, he didn't have a wife and kids and even a girlfriend most of the time. So he could focus his free time that he did have on training, and that was his whole goal. See, he moved here to train, so okay, I got to keep training. Other people, may not have that kind of, uh, you know, dedication, which is nothing wrong with that. Some people do, some people don't, or some people have it, but not for that chosen thing. But Brian had it in spades. And then he was smart enough to realize, hey, I've got to work. I'm young enough yet. I got to worry about my education. I've got to go get my degree. I got to find work. I got to do da 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 da. It's called life getting in the way, and he turned out better for it. And like I said, I can't be prouder of him. And Kevin loved him. Kevin would talk about you all the time. And he would always ask about you. Have you heard from Brian? I'm like, yeah, well, no, or yeah, whatever. Yeah, it's just great. Brian's touched me and my circle. Uh, my mom, before all of this, she doesn't remember anybody now, but she remembered you in the past, and she would always ask how you're doing, and because Brian used to come over, my mom would make something to eat, whatever it was, and yeah, this was she loved you, man. She
Yeah,
really did.
there was a lot of support from Tony and Kevin and even Tony's family, his mother, with I mean, there was a time I was taking classes at the college, and I had a part-time job, so I didn't have a lot of money. I was paying rent, and go to Tony's, I have dinner there, or Kevin might buy me lunch, or honestly, a lot of times at Tool and Die Shop there was always supplements. So sometimes my lunch was a coffee cup of water mixed with some protein and choking that down. So there was and then obviously a lot of times when I go to the bar, and Tony was the one picking up the drinks. So I had that support system, despite all of the kind of the life limitations or challenges of being a young person, trying to do all this other stuff. So Kevin was a great guy. I mean, I gotta say, he was, there's this whole like men's rights or pickup artists, manly, the revival of manliness that's going on with a lot of subcultures, in the internet now. I mean, Kevin could have he could have run an organization with, a guy who could, a bench press champion, still good looking, a master with his hands. I'm talking a tool and die, master craftsman. He repaired my car one time because it was busted up, and flying a plane, hunting, fishing. I mean, he was all that and then some. So when I look back now, all these guys that are trying to do, and there's a lot of them obviously being strong men, but Kevin was definitely, the role of that, for me 20 some years ago.
Yeah, the biggest loss for you, Nico, and all this thing is not to get to meet him. He was unbelievable. So Tom Antion had come out one time to train, and I had this special grip machine. That's the one that I ended up injuring myself on, but it's like real complex, real, all of this. And Tom's like, man, I really want one of them. I says, well, the guy that made them is dead. He's like, well, what are we going to do? And then Kevin was there in the gym. Kevin's like, oh shit, I can make one of them easy. I'm like, yeah, I'm sure he can. And sure enough, Kevin did. And matter of fact, he made two. He made an extra one for me. And Kevin made special grip machines, and a grip machine down there out of forks from a Harley. And we made a special neck machine. He was gifted, with that machining, the tool and die stuff. And just, he had that. But here's what's funny. I always thought because of his tool and die and his ability to do all of this, that the submission holds, the science of the leverage and fulcrum and all of that would come very easy to Kevin, but it did not. It did not come. It was a struggle for him because it was a whole different, I mean, you think they're correlated, but they really weren't. It was a whole different thing. The moves that I showed him, he had to put in the work, but he wasn't like Brian. I mean, he didn't do it like constantly. He just wanted to know enough to defend himself in a street fight situation. And that guy, I miss him every single day of my life. He's one of those special people. I've been lucky. I've met a lot of great ones, and one of them is sitting here, Brian, and both of you guys, Joe and Nico as well. Just you guys mean everything to me. I'm very sincere with my friends, but I wish people that are out there listening or watching realize that we had it rough. We trained under the worst possible conditions. Okay, people who would train outdoors in a park had it like 100 times better than training in that tool and die shop. I mean, it was bad, condition wise, and yet we never let it stop us from getting strong, from getting fit, from getting tough. These guys developed. There were no fancy health clubs. There was none of that. Okay, no showers, none of that. Right? Kevin would come in there while these guys are wrestling, smoking his cigar, and blowing smoke everywhere. Didn't matter. No, like I said, no heat. Matter of fact, in my journal, I would put the temperature, what it was outside on every workout. Okay. And I would, make detailed notes of what I did and what the temperature was. So think about this when it's like Chicago winters, and it's in the teens or whatever, and you're lifting or you're wrestling, there was no heat on that section. On that side, there wasn't. So it was like brutally cold. And again, in the summer, it could get blistering hot. So you're working in these kind of conditions. It gives you intestinal fortitude. That's for sure. As far as I know, the building there is still standing. I haven't been down there in 3 years, roughly, but great times. Hopefully, once people get through this COVID, and it's going to be a while, and I don't think training will ever be. I'm not going to say it's never going to go back to the way it was, but there's always going to be a different way of training now, as well, and as it should be, I guess. But ideally, the only restrictions are the ones that you put on yourself. Okay, so someone, the government, or whatever it is, whoever it is, could stop you from working out as you have been or where you have been, but only you can stop yourself from actually working out. And God forbid something happens to you physically where you're not able to do the things, you can still, as long as your mind's still fresh and sharp, you can develop mentally and you can do visualization or just study and learn. And then when you get back on your feet or you get your location that you prefer, you're not starting from square one again. And please remember what Brian said. We were basically working out in a 10 by 12, 10 by 15 area. Okay. That's like, if that, okay, that's your living room. Move your coffee table out of the way. And these guys got to be very, very, very good. Because they had the good techniques but they put the effort in. They didn't say, "Oh, to hell with it. This is not a fancy gym. I'm not going to work out here." These guys stuck it out. I'm proud of them.
There was one of the few gyms that I'd come back from smelling like cigar smoke. That's what I remember a lot of times. I back from work.
Did your wife believe that you were working out, Joe, or did that cause any problems?
No, it just was a special care. Yeah, often actually, when my son would in Bensonville, I'd bring my boys there too, and we'd have a good workout. But it was like, are you teaching the boys to smoke now too, or what?
Yeah, you missed out on some certain things that we can't talk about publicly right now. At least I don't have that one. You couldn't bring your boys for that. There was some fun stuff going on in there, man. We had a lot of fun. It was a very interesting area. Stone Park, Mannheim was very interesting. It has a sordid past, actually. Um, bars staying open till 6, or closing for an hour and then reopening, and ladies of the evening are aplenty. That kind of stuff. It was just very interesting, area for sure. It's changed, I think, somewhat.
You mentioned about like kind of obviously we always had to be aware of our environment because of like the drill presses and all the dangerous things. I mean, I honestly feel that you maybe don't want to have drill presses in your gym or your workout space, but it would be good to kind of simulate whether it's putting tape on the mat or something, putting an object up to make sure, hey, because we had to be aware of our surroundings constantly. You couldn't just be focused on the guy in front of you. I had to be worried if I take him down, am I going to take him down into something that'll hurt me or hurt him? And I think in a real self-defense scenario, you have to be you can't just have the blinders on worrying about the guy in front of you. You've got to know what you could be running into, what you could be tripping over. And I think there's actually some value in somehow trying to simulate that. I mean, what are your thoughts on that, guys?
Well, the good news is you were never able to take anybody down, so you didn't have to worry about hurting them that way or yourself. So, but let's just say you were capable of it, and I'm joking for those people who may not know. Yeah, I think that's all part of it. But I've always said you need to train in a restricted area. You can't, you don't have in a real life scenario, you don't have this kind of great room. You don't have 30 by 30 space. Generally speaking, you just don't. You have obstacles everywhere. So, I mean, if you just want to be a sportsman and you just want to compete, like a wrestling thing or a boxing ring or a, octagon thing, okay, then, go to a gym that has that or tape it off. But yeah, I believe you have, it's all about, like, for me, it's self-defense first and foremost. It's really that, you know? So yeah, I'm all about these obstacles and making your training more realistic.
Yeah,
Well, anyway,
it seems like the environment can kind of dictate the style to some degree. You know, like Taekwondo is generally there's a lot of space in the gym, and some of these other arts, even wrestling, there's usually a lot of space. So I think that could be helpful to kind of change the dynamics.
sure. Yeah. Of course, there's, of course, but everybody has their, it's not an agenda, like a negative, but the agenda, let's say in this place, is to learn how to wrestle or to learn how to box or to learn how to just lift weights. you know, um, like here, I go to Planet. Well, I haven't worked out in a long time because it's COVID, but I ended up having to go to Planet Fitness. I don't like the place. Honestly, it's okay, but it doesn't have the kind of equipment that I'm used to, but I work around it. Okay, I'm limited in what I can do, but I was still able to adapt to a degree. Um, and that's what I think some people have to realize. They go to a place, it may not have all the amenities that you want, but work with what you have, and there's always ways to, make some sort of improvement in yourself, I believe.
So, so Brian, what's the future for you here now? We just started a new year, obviously, so everybody's thinking about, obviously we're kind of in a weird new year. We're still kind of in the middle of this COVID thing, but it looks like, thank God we've got some vaccines, and maybe by springtime things are going to start opening back up. What's the short term and long term plans you got? What's on the horizon for you?
Well, out specific to, the physical and training, I hadn't been training for quite a while because I was rearing kids, but early in the year, I actually joined a gym, jujitsu, MMA school, and was active with them. And then COVID hit. So that was unfortunate. So haven't been back since then. But in the meantime, I've been training in my basement where we're sitting right now. So there's my wife ended up getting the Beachbody on-demand suite. So there's actually dozens of workout videos, and she just bought through the year. So I do that, and then I've also been working out in this. Give them a free plug, Gym Fit or Gymnastic Bodies, which is it's essentially a former national gymnastics coach member who's created this program for like gymnastics for the layman. And that's been helpful because, I mean, obviously I've combat sports and catch wrestling, and like anything, it takes its toll on the body. You know, I've had some knee surgeries and I've had some issues with my neck and shoulders over the years, and some of those real focused mobility and strength, related exercises, I think are really helping me kind of get back to where when we get to a point where we start going with partners again, in 2021 soon, hopefully, I'll be teed up to do that. So that's my plan. I'm, and I wanted to reconnect with you guys. One reason I was more than open to being on the podcast is just keeping this in my mind and, keeping it rolling until we're able to do a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm hoping that we can start doing, later in the year, monthly seminars again, like we were. We'll see but even so, I'm really pushing for the distance learning because I had been doing that before, and never have not stopped. But I think that really needs to increase, because more and more people around the world need this kind of training, and it may be difficult for them to travel here, uh, for whatever, that may mean, for whatever the reason would be, not necessarily COVID related. So to let them know. So that's why I'm setting up stuff, and I will be ready to go and hopefully launch a new thing by the end of this month, beginning of February. Just a little behind schedule, not my fault, but with shipment, things are not coming as timely as they can be. And like even with me, my car broke down over a week ago, and my mechanic's been closed for the holidays. So I've been not leaving my house. I can't even go anywhere. So we'll get it all going. But
Well,
I do
Tony, you
want to.
mentioned
What?
the Lucky 13. I will say, for anybody who wants to get in like really quick shape, ready to roll, and that's one product that somebody can do on their own time, in virtually any space. I was doing that quite a bit, so much that my VHS tape that I got 20 years ago on that program is wore out. So I'm gonna have to get buy a download from you coming up. But
There you
yeah,
go.
that's one that good old Martin and Dave went through it, and big shot in the arm if anybody wants to just to get in quick shape, put in the work. That's one that I recommend.
Yeah, I thought it was pretty cool because Martin kept going, and then Dave purposely would stop to kind of like, it was like a dual motivation. And that's one of those tapes that's like an infinity tape. You keep getting better. You put more effort into it. You go harder. It's not like you do more exercises. Do the same exercises, but more intensity, less rest, so on and so forth. So yeah, it's great, and you can do that in your home. And I even show it like, if you don't have a running track, run in place, but hard. Yeah, I miss those times, man. It was interesting. Boy, again, that tape's been out a long time. That that's close to 20 years. Not quite 20 years, but it's approaching it, you know. But anyway, yep, we're looking at the clock on the wall. It's about that time to bid adieu. But before we do, I want to thank Brian again. Brian, you've been, you mean the world to me, always have. And, when you first moved out to Chicago, I didn't know what to think of it. I'm like, well, okay, hi, and you stuck it out. And, I knew that it was going to be difficult because of the location that I was at. It wasn't the gym that we were at in Pennsylvania, and it wasn't, Militich's place, wherever else you worked at. This was like bad. And I'm like, oh, but you stuck it out. And, you know, my hat's off to you. You had the discipline and the dedication. That's the one thing I wish on everybody that's listening out there. No matter what it is you want to do in life, if you can have the dedication like Brian did, you can't help but succeed. You're gonna come out ahead. And the good news is, Brian, you can have that same dedication is going to be with you the rest of your life. You just need to find what's next. What's the challenge? Sounding like you're trying to come full circle and get back into this again, working out and everything. I'm all for it, man. Anything I can do to help,
For
let me
sure.
know.
And you'd kind of touched on it earlier in our conversation. Like there's different phases in life, right? There's different chapters. And, Javier Palomo, obviously a former training partner, multiple world champion now, very accomplished. Back then, he's training with us, but he was raising kids, in a new marriage. And it was like he couldn't put in the time or effort that I could at the time. So now, tables have turned. I'm kind of dealing with those same issues that he had then. But you get it while you can is really what it is, and when you can.
Well, let me ask you this, because it's all going to probably come to a head next Sunday. If you should win the hair challenge, okay, do you think that this is going to take you down a path? Like maybe, I mean, I don't know, Hollywood. I mean, who knows, right? I mean, you don't know where this could go. I mean, if you win, are you up for that challenge to accept knowing that you have the greatest hair in catch wrestling?
That's a lot. That's a lot. I'll have to digest that one and really think about whether I can assume that mantle.
Yeah, there's a lot of
I really will.
responsibility that comes with that. So before you jump ahead, think about the consequences for sure.
Well, you're not counted out yet, Joe. I mean, you're still the reigning champion here. Okay. It's going to a vote. And, I mean, I wish you both the
Well,
best.
Tony, you're going to have to talk to Mrs. DeNeve because she keeps telling me that she wants me to cut my hair. So I don't know. Maybe this is something else that'll let her stick it out a little bit, especially if I'm the winner. Not trying to sway anybody's vote, but I'm just saying for the peace of mind in my household here.
Well, you got, like I said, it's all about priorities, and family has its place, but hair, that's another thing.
Well, we'll just hope for the best here.
And there's really no loser, honestly. There's just, two great winners. All our viewers actually are winners in this scenario.
Yeah, because they get to see both of you guys.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I get it. Well, anyway, though, but I do want to say thanks, and I look forward to seeing everybody next week. And, of course, Nico and Joe, or even Brian, if you got anything to say, reach me out, hit me up this week. I got a few things to do, but right now I got to try to get my mom back on track. That's really difficult, but we'll. Well, thanks again, everybody, for watching and or listening. That's all I have to say.
It was great having you on, Brian. I'm really glad to share some of those
Hey,
memories.
thank you for inviting me and having me on. It's been great. And like I said, I've been listening from afar, not too far, Wisconsin, but listening for quite a while, enjoying the talks, and a lot more to talk about, man. Tony's a wealth of info, and like you said, I only had a chance to delve into a little bit of the combatives and striking, but a lot of the conditioning and grappling, and there's a whole lot more there. So
we'll have you back on for sure. You'll be back on again. We'll for sure.
All right, guys, have a good week.
You too.
Bye.
Good week, guys.
Take care, guys.
Thank you.